They told me the trail was perfect for bird watching, remote, untouched, the kind of place where the air tastes green, and the only sounds are wind in the leaves and wings overhead. No service out here, no cabins, no signs of people for miles. Just forest, just quiet. I'd been craving that kind of silence for months. So, I packed my gear, binoculars, camera, field journal, and drove out before dawn. The ranger at the old check station barely looked up from his coffee when I signed. He just muttered something under his breath, something I didn't catch, and handed my papers back. The forest was alive when I first stepped onto the trail. Every branch seemed to tremble with wings. Every shadow held a flash of color. I thought I'd hit the jackpot on a perfect day, a perfect place. But by evening, the tone of the woods had shifted. The calls I heard weren't the same cheerful trills and whistles I'd grown used to identifying. These were longer, slower, more deliberate, and they weren't coming from overhead. That night, sitting by my small campfire, I realized I hadn't actually seen a bird in hours. But something had been watching me all the same, and then I saw pairs of eyes in the trees. Too high for a fox, too still for an owl, too wide. They didn't blink, and no matter how still I sat, they never looked away. I haven't told anyone this before. Not my friends, not my family, not even the guy who sells me my coffee every morning, the one who somehow knows when I've had a bad night's sleep just by looking at me. I've kept this to myself for weeks now, but lately, the silence has started to feel heavier than the memory itself. You seem like someone who's seen strange things too. Someone who wouldn't laugh or tell me I imagined it. Someone who knows there are places in the world where rules don't work the way we think they do. That's why I need you to promise me something before I start. Promise me you won't try to find it. Don't go looking for that trail. Don't go looking for that cabin in the woods. Don't do what I did. It's easy to think the middle of nowhere is safe and peaceful even. The brochures and hiking forums make it sound so harmless. A great weekend escape, they say. No cell signal, no traffic noise, just you and nature. And yeah, for the first day, that's exactly what it felt like. I remember unzipping my tent that morning, stepping into the cool air, and thinking I'd made the best decision of my life. The forest seemed endless, green shadows stretching in every direction. My boots crunched over soft soil, my binoculars swinging against my chest as I scanned for movement in the branches. The thing about bird watching is, you get good at stillness. You learn to listen to the quiet between sounds. You can tell when a forest feels normal, when the wind is carrying on like it always hasn't, when it's holding its breath. That second day, the quiet changed. It wasn't the peaceful kind anymore. It was the kind that makes you glance over your shoulder without knowing why. The kind that makes the hairs on your arms stand up even though the air isn't cold. By nightfall, I was sure I wasn't alone. You ever stay somewhere with no signal? It's freeing at first. No buzzing phone, no endless notifications. But when things start to go wrong, that's when you realize how dangerous it is. You can scream if you want. You can run, but without service, without neighbors, without anyone. You're just an echo trapped in the trees. I'd picked a spot near an abandoned cabin. Not that I planned to stay in it. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The wood was warped, the windows coated in a film of dust and spiderwebs. But I figured, worst case, if a storm rolled in, I'd have some kind of shelter. That night, lying in my sleeping bag, I started hearing things. Not just the normal forest noises, rustles, twigs snapping, wind sighing through leaves. These were deliberate sounds. Slow, heavy steps circling my camp. Pauses that felt like whoever or whatever was out there was listening to me breathe. I told myself it was an animal. I even whispered it out loud. Just a deer, maybe a raccoon. My voice sounded small in the dark. But then came the noises I couldn't explain. A soft tapping, like fingernails on wood. coming from the direction of the cabin. A low hum that wasn't wind, wasn't water, and didn't fade when I covered my ears. I didn't sleep that night, not a second. And when the sun finally came up, I told myself I'd pack my gear and head back to the car. But I didn't. I don't know why. Curiosity, stupidity, that strange pull you feel when something wants you to stay. You've probably heard stories about people wandering too deep into the woods and not coming back. I used to think it was because they got lost. Now, I'm not so sure, because sometimes the forest finds you first, and once it has you, it doesn't let go. That's why I'm telling you this now, because ever since I came back, I haven't been the same. I still hear those noises when my apartment is quiet at night. I still wake up from dreams where those eyes are watching me through my window, even though I live on the 3rd floor. I just need someone to listen, not to fix it, not to tell me it's in my head, just to hear me, because I don't think I left that forest alone. I think the cabin was smaller than I pictured when I first saw it in person, but somehow it felt heavier, like the kind of place that's been sitting in one spot for far too long, letting the weight of the forest press into its walls. You'd never stumble across it by accident. You had to follow the narrowing dirt road for nearly an hour past the last gas station, then keep driving until the trees grew so close together their branches knitted into a kind of ceiling above you, blotting out most of the sky. The first time I stepped out of the car, I noticed how quiet it was. No distant hum of traffic, no faint mechanical buzz from power lines, no planes overhead, just the wind moving through the pines in long, steady breaths. Even my own footsteps on the dirt felt too loud. The cabin itself sat in a small clearing, its wood dark and swollen from years of rain and snow. The boards bowed outward in places, and green moss clung to the shaded side like it was trying to swallow the place whole. A stone chimney leaned at a slight angle, just enough that it made you wonder if it was still safe to light a fire in it. The porch sagged in the middle, letting out a long, tired groan when I stepped onto it, and the railings on either side were soft to the touch from rot. The windows caught my eye right away, not because they were broken or boarded up, but because of the glass itself. It was cloudy, almost opaque, with decades of dust and streaks of something I didn't want to think about. When I got closer, I realized they also had this faint reflective quality, like they were trying to show me something that wasn't quite there. The guy who rented me the place, Earl, handed me the keys without much small talk. He didn't seem like the type to enjoy long conversations, but there was something in the way he looked past me toward the tree line that stuck with me, like he was waiting to see something move. He gave me 2 rules. First, don't go wandering at night. Second, if you hear something in the trees, don't follow it. He didn't laugh after he said them, didn't wink to let me know it was just a joke. He just looked at me with these tired, bloodshot eyes, the kind that suggested he'd been up for nights on end. I think I smiled awkwardly, told him I could handle being alone. That's what I was here for. After all, no cell signal, no neighbors, no deadlines, just me, the woods, and quiet. I didn't notice until later how fast he left after unloading my bag from his truck, like he couldn't stand being here a second longer than necessary. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and something faintly metallic. The layout was simple: a small kitchen to the left, a narrow hallway leading to the bedroom and bathroom, and a living room with a low ceiling that seemed to push the air down. The furniture was mismatched: an old sofa with the stuffing peeking out of one armrest, a single table with 2 chairs, and a bed covered in a thick quilt that looked handmade. I took a moment to breathe it in, to try and get used to the stillness. But there was something about the air that didn't feel right. It wasn't stale exactly, it was heavier, like it carried more weight than it should. Every sound I made seemed to stay in the room a fraction longer than normal, as though the walls were reluctant to let go of it. There were scratches along some of the wooden panels in the hallway. At first I assumed they were from an animal, maybe a raccoon or a stray dog, but they were too high for that, and the marks themselves were strangely deliberate. Not random clawing, but repeated vertical lines, almost like tallies. That first night, I noticed the clock above the kitchen counter had stopped. I didn't think much of it until I realized it had frozen at exactly 3:17. I reset it, went to bed, and when I checked again the next afternoon, it had stopped at the same time. By the second day, the birds outside had gone silent. I don't mean they were quieter. I mean it was like someone had flipped a switch and erased them entirely. No chirping at dawn, no rustle of wings in the branches, nothing. The absence was so complete that it made me hyper-aware of every other sound. The third strange thing happened on the evening of my second night. I was moving past the living room window when I caught my reflection looking back at me. Only I'd already stepped out of frame. My body had moved on, but my face was still there for a fraction of a second longer, staring back at me with this hollow expression I swear I wasn't making. I tried to laugh it off. I told myself isolation can play tricks on the mind, but every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me. Not the casual kind of a deer nearby. This was sharper, closer, like whatever was watching me was standing just out of sight. One step beyond the tree line. I remember walking the perimeter of the clearing, just before sunset. The trees loomed so tall, they seemed to lean in toward the cabin, as though they were trying to listen. The ground between the trunks was darker than it should have been, even for that time of day, and I thought I saw something shift between them, not movement exactly, more like the absence of movement, a darker shadow sliding behind the others. That's when I noticed the marks on the trees. Deep carvings that spiraled upward, etched into the bark in strange looping patterns. They weren't fresh, but they didn't look like they'd weathered much either. My first thought was that they were some kind of trail markers, but they didn't lead anywhere. They just seemed to circle the clearing, as if drawing a boundary. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the cabin wasn't just isolated, it was contained. Like whatever was out there wasn't meant to come in, and whatever was in here wasn't meant to leave. I don't know how to explain it to you without sounding paranoid, but from the very beginning, I knew I wasn't completely alone out here. The signs were too subtle to scream danger, but they were there, hidden in the warped wood, in the silent trees, in the way the air seemed to listen. And the worst part, some small part of me was already starting to believe that Earl's warnings weren't just superstition. I should have left then. I should have gotten in my car, driven back down that endless dirt road, and never looked back. But I didn't, because I wanted to believe that sometimes strange places are just strange, and nothing more. I wanted to believe that silence can be harmless, but now, sitting here telling you this, I know better. By the third night, I was no longer sure if the forest outside was quiet because it was asleep or because it was listening. The stillness had grown heavy, like a thick blanket draped over the cabin, muffling the world beyond its walls. That was the first night I heard the knocking. It was soft at first, so faint that I thought it might be the wood settling. 3 slow taps, spaced just far enough apart to let my mind fill the silence between them. I lay in bed, holding my breath, straining my ears. Then it came again, 3 more, this time louder, sharper. Not the sound of a building shifting, but of knuckles against wood. I waited for it to stop. It didn't. The knocking didn't come from the front door or the back. It moved. Sometimes it was at the wall near my bed, sometimes from the floor beneath me. The worst was when it came from inside the walls, as though something was crawling between them, testing for weak spots. I told myself not to check, not to play into whatever this was, but the sound didn't want to be ignored. The following night, I woke to the creak of the front door opening. I had locked it. I was certain I had. I stayed in bed, listening, my eyes fixed on the thin strip of moonlight spilling across the floor from the living room. The door clicked shut again, slow and deliberate, as if whoever had entered didn't want to wake me or wanted me to know they were there. I got up in the morning to find the door still locked from the inside. My dreams started changing. At first they were vague, shifting shadows and distant whispers I couldn't quite make out. But then I began to hear words. My name, spoken in a voice that wasn't mine, wasn't anyone I knew. Sometimes the voice would tell me to look outside, other times it told me not to move. When I woke, I'd hear the exact same words echoing faintly in the cabin, as though the dream had followed me into waking life. The strangest thing was the furniture. One night the small wooden chair by the table was gone. I searched the cabin, but it wasn't anywhere. Not in the kitchen, not in the bedrooms, not even outside. The next morning it was back in its place, but facing the wrong way, as though someone had been sitting in it, watching me sleep. By now, I had stopped opening the curtains after sunset. I didn't want to see what might be looking back at me, but sometimes I could feel it anyway. That prickling along the back of my neck, the weight of unseen eyes. The air inside the cabin felt colder at night, heavy with a damp, earthy smell, as if the forest itself had crept indoors. The disturbances never came all at once. They escalated slowly, deliberately, like something was testing me, watching how much I could take before I broke. Knocks became scratches. The voice in my dreams began answering questions I had never asked aloud, and every morning, no matter how I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, or the old wood shifting, or my mind playing tricks, I knew deep down something was in here with me. It was the 5th morning when I found the journal. I hadn't been looking for it. I had been pacing the cabin, trying to convince myself that I hadn't really heard the scratching inside the walls the night before, that I hadn't seen the chair move on its own. I'd stepped on a loose floorboard near the corner of the bedroom, a spot I'd walked over dozens of times without noticing anything strange. This time, though, the wood shifted under my weight with a hollow groan, as if it were holding its breath. I knelt down and pried it up. Beneath it was a small, dusty cavity, no bigger than a shoebox. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and flaking, the pages yellowed and warped from years of damp. I hesitated before opening it, my fingertips tingling like they'd been holding something electric. It felt wrong to touch it, but something in me needed to know. The handwriting inside was cramped and erratic, sometimes slanting upward, as though the writer's hand had been shaking. At first, the entries were mundane notes about hunting trips, repairs to the cabin, strange weather in the fall of '62. Then, about halfway through, the tone changed. The writer began describing noises in the night, knocking, scratching, whispers. The more I read, the more the entries began to mirror what I had been experiencing. The exact same events, almost word for word. 3 knocks on the wall by my bed, just after midnight. The door opened without a sound, though I locked it. Voices. In dreams they know my name. My chest tightened. It was like the journal was a script, and I was just playing out the next lines. One passage made me stop cold. The writer claimed that whatever lived in the forest wasn't an animal. It wasn't a person. It was something older. Something that had always been here. The eyes, he wrote, do not blink like ours. They watch for long stretches without moving. Sometimes they appear in the branches, sometimes in the glass. Never in the same place twice. I didn't want to believe him. I told myself the journal was just a story, maybe an old campfire tale written down to scare someone. But when I reached the final entries, that thin wall of disbelief crumbled. The handwriting became frantic, almost illegible, words bleeding into each other. The last few pages were just warnings, over and over again. Don't follow the knocking. Don't open the door, no matter what it says. They can't come inside unless you let them. If you see the eyes, pretend you don't. The final line was written in deep, jagged strokes that had nearly torn through the paper. They want to wear you. I sat there for a long time, the journal heavy in my lap, my ears straining for sounds I didn't want to hear. The forest outside seemed unnaturally still. Even the usual daytime noises, the wind in the leaves, the distant call of birds had vanished. When I finally worked up the nerve to look out the window, I saw them, not birds, not people, just two pale, round shapes high in the trees, too far apart to be human eyes, too wide and unblinking to belong to any animal I knew. They were fixed on the cabin, on me. I stepped back, heart hammering. That night, I nailed the floorboard shut. I put the journal back exactly where I'd found it, but it didn't matter. I know now, and whatever was out there knew that I knew. The knocking started again around midnight, but this time it didn't move around the cabin. It stayed at the front door, slow and patient. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more, and in the spaces between, I could swear I heard breathing. The voice came next, not in my dreams, but in the waking dark, seeping through the wood like water. It was soft, almost kind, calling my name, telling me to let it in, promising it wouldn't hurt me. My hands gripped the blanket so tightly I thought the fabric would tear. I didn't answer. I didn't move, but I couldn't stop thinking that maybe the writer in the journal had been right. Maybe one night, without realizing it, I'd answer. It was 2 days after I found the journal when I finally decided I had to leave. Not wanting to have to. Every creak of the cabin seemed heavier, every shadow longer. The knocking hadn't stopped. It came at different hours now, not just midnight. Sometimes while I was eating, sometimes while I was brushing my teeth. Like it wanted me to know it could reach me whenever it pleased. The voice had grown bolder, too. I could hear it walking the perimeter, sliding along the outer walls, speaking in tones that mimicked people I'd known, my father, an old friend, even a woman I'd once loved. It didn't matter whose voice it used. The words were always the same. Just open the door. By dawn, I had packed my bag. I took only what I could carry and left the rest. My plan was simple. Follow the dirt path back to the logging road. Hitch a ride into town. Never return. But the forest had other plans. The trail was the same one I had walked dozens of times before. But that morning, it felt wrong. The trees leaned closer, their trunks swollen with shadow. The air smelled sour, like rotting leaves after a heavy rain. I walked faster, but the path seemed to stretch in front of me, like it was unspooling endlessly, each bend revealing more of the same. I checked my watch. I'd been walking for over an hour, but the cabin still wasn't far behind me. I could see it through the trees, sitting exactly where it had been, as if I'd been walking in a circle without realizing it. My chest tightened. I tried to turn back, but the path behind me looked different now. Narrower, darker. The whispers returned, not from behind this time, but from above. I looked up and saw pale shapes among the branches, too still to be animals, too far apart to be human eyes. I kept walking, not daring to blink. The voice called again, softer now, coaxing. You're going the wrong way. Let me help you. I don't remember when I started running. I only remember the cold in my lungs and the pounding in my head. The forest began to bend in impossible ways. A tree I passed would appear ahead of me again. A fallen log would block the path twice in less than a minute. The sun stayed locked in the same place above the treetops, never shifting. I was trapped in a loop that made no sense. At some point, I fell. The ground beneath me wasn't dirt anymore, but soft and cold, like wet fabric. It was slightly under my weight. When I scrambled to my feet, I realized I was standing on the blanket from my bed in the cabin. The forest had folded me back to where I started. The cabin door was open. I swear I had locked it when I left. My bag slid from my shoulder, and I stepped inside without thinking, like something had reached inside my skull and turned the wheel. The air was warmer here, almost welcoming. The knocking had stopped. The voice didn't call my name. For the first time in days, it was silent. The floorboard in the bedroom was open again. The journal was gone. I don't remember lying down, but I must have, because when I opened my eyes again, it was dark outside. The window above me showed nothing but black, though the moon should have been out. Something moved in that darkness, slow and deliberate. A shape too large to be a person leaned close to the glass. Two pale, unblinking circles stared in. I should have screamed. I should have run. Instead, I smiled. It's strange how quickly fear can turn into something else, maybe, or recognition. I think I understand now what the writer in the journal meant when he said, "They want to wear you." It doesn't feel like they're taking something from me. It feels like they're giving something back. I don't hear the knocking anymore. I don't need to. The door stays open now. The forest no longer hides its paths from me. I can walk anywhere I like, as long as it's under the trees. If you ever find this place, you might see me. I might even wave to you from the window. You won't recognize my face, but I'll recognize yours. I'll call your name in the softest voice, and you'll feel a tug in your chest to come closer. You'll want to step inside, and when you do, I'll make sure the door closes behind you. You've been so quiet this whole time, just sitting there, listening. I can tell you've been holding your breath through parts of it, the same way I used to when I thought the knocking might pass me by if I didn't make a sound. But you can breathe now. It's over for me. That doesn't mean it will be over for you. I'm not the same person who started telling you this. I can hear it in my own voice, slower now, softer. Words stretched like they've been pulled from somewhere, far away. My hands don't shake anymore. My chest doesn't tighten when I think about the cabin. That's the part that should scare you the most. Fear is something you can fight. This is what I am now. You can't fight it. I haven't slept since that night. I don't mean I haven't tried. I mean it doesn't happen anymore. My body will rest, but my mind stays awake, like my thoughts are suspended just above the surface of a dream that never comes. And in that endless, quiet dark, I hear them. Not just knocking now, footsteps in slow, deliberate patterns, moving in ways that don't match the shape of any human body. Sometimes I hear my own voice in the mix, calling to someone I can't see. You'd think the sounds would fade with distance, but they don't. I've traveled miles from that cabin. I've stayed in other towns, other states, but the knocking always comes back. The voices always find me. It's like I'm a doorway they can carry around with them. I'm never outside of it. The journal is gone. I don't know if I left it there or if it followed me the same way they did, but the words are still in my head. I can feel them pressing against my skull when I close my eyes. They want to wear you. I understand now that it wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'll catch my reflection moving a split second out of sync. Just enough to notice. Just enough to remind me I'm not completely alone here anymore. I've stopped checking mirrors for too long. I'm afraid, if I look too closely, I'll see something in my eyes, staring back, not hostile, not angry, just patient. I'm telling you all this because maybe you'll believe me, and maybe you'll remember it when you need to. If you ever find yourself on that path in the woods, if you ever see the cabin, don't go in. Don't even stop to look. Turn around and leave while you still can. If you hear knocking, don't answer. If a voice calls your name, keep walking, no matter how much it sounds like someone you love. And if you can't bring yourself to leave, if you step inside, burn it. Burn it down to the foundation, and keep burning until the ground itself turns to ash. That's the only way, if there even is one. I can't do that now. The door is always open for me, wherever I go. The forest follows. The knocking follows. The voice is never far, so I'll just keep talking to you, to anyone who will listen. Maybe it's a warning. Maybe it's just the thing they want me to do, lure someone else to the door. I can't always tell the difference anymore. You should probably leave now. I think I hear footsteps outside. You've been listening for a while now. Maybe you've even been thinking about your own nights, the ones where something felt off. When the floor creaked in a room you knew was empty. When the air shifted, like someone stepped in close, but you couldn't see them. I need to know, has it ever happened to you? Have you ever heard footsteps when you were supposed to be alone? A door opening when you know you locked it? A voice whispering your name when there was no one there? Tell me. Write it down below. I read every single one. Sometimes, I even recognize the patterns in them. Sometimes, I see the same things showing up in different stories from people who I have never met. It's almost like whatever's out there is moving from place to place, testing different doors. Your story might help me figure out how far they've gone, or it might just prove that it's not just me anymore. Either way, don't keep it to yourself. And when you tell it, make sure you're not alone. Don't listen to the next story in the dark. Don't sit with your back to an open doorway. And if you do hear knocking while you're typing, don't answer it.